Hello, my name is Josh from Cyclones Oz, and today we're going to be tracking the Coral Sea/Vanuatu tropical cyclone that's developed overnight, and we're also going to be taking a look at a system that's expected to get very strong in the Gulf of Carpentaria. The Bureau of Meteorology is now also monitoring that system, and then we'll take a general long-term look at the Australian weather as well, or a bit of a longer form look, because I know I've only spent a couple of minutes looking at the Australian weather each video. We'll spend about 10 minutes really breaking down what's going on as well, so stick around for the end of the video for that. But first of all, tracking this Vanuatu system over here, you can see it's wrapping itself up nice. It was looking a lot better earlier on today and also into yesterday evening as well, but it does have some really decent convection that's starting to blow up across Vanuatu. The forecast has changed. A lot of the forecast models were calling for the system to stall around New Caledonia and then swing back into the Coral Sea. We're now just expecting this storm to move on towards Fiji as a very weak tropical storm equivalent system. It's not going to be a significant storm, that's for sure, but still quite a strong amount of convection really starting to blow up here. And I mean, if we were to take a look at the infrared satellite imagery, you can see the blacks and the whites indicate really strong thunderstorms now moving through Luganville and towards Port Vila. This is looking quite decent. Now, if it does get named by the Fiji Meteorology Service today, it'll pick up the name of Pita, P-I-T-A. So make sure you are hearing for that name in the official broadcasts and on the news and so forth if you are in the Vanuatu and also in New Caledonia as well, because you could still receive impacts from this system as far away as New Caledonia. But it looks like Vanuatu around Port Vila is where we're expecting a Category 1 strength landfall. We'll just take a look at the forecast now. It's going to be a really weak, broad, messy system, but you can see we're still expecting that landfall on Vanuatu or Port Vila as a Category 1 strength system, probably sometime early Saturday morning. Maybe it just moves just towards the south, but it'll be very weak, very messy, and very disorganized. And you can see it's really struggling to get cyclone equivalent winds around its center right now. There's no meteorology station anywhere near the storm center that actually has cyclone winds right now. The station closest to the storm center, which would probably be through here down towards New Caledonia, only has winds of around 32 kilometers an hour, which actually means that this storm is probably a lot weaker than what we are actually thinking. As per the model run. So there's a good chance that this never gets up to cyclone status and just remains a bit of a convection blob in the Coral Sea moving through Vanuatu. And then, as I said, looking long range around Saturday, Sunday, this is the Access G3 model, by the way. It heads towards Fiji in particular, the main Fiji island, and you can see it still holds on to some kind of intensity. It's probably only about 40 knots at this time with peak winds, 70 to 75 kilometers an hour. It's really not a strong system at all before just clipping the southern part of Fiji and moving towards Tonga, and what looks like it's going to die off around there. And then looking long range, it looks like you can't really make a good forecast with this system. It looks like it's going to become really monsoonal and quite broad, and it'll have a lot of thunderstorm activity firing up around it, but it's not going to be a strong system in terms of maximum sustained winds. Now, this is the Access G3 model, but it's the only forecast model that has anything from this tropical cyclone beyond Monday. So it's the system that the model that I'm using just to give the maximum range of possibilities in terms of the storm's lifespan. I don't think that the Access G3 model is going to be the one that actually reciprocates in this storm. Still, the Eastern Relief calling for it to just completely lose itself as it moves south of Vanuatu. I think that's a more likely scenario, but there is still this chance that Fiji does get impacted by what looks to be maybe a really weak Category 1 tropical cyclone, or maybe just a bunch of really blowy thunderstorms come around mid next week into later next week, but they should completely clear out by next weekend. Let's take a look at rainfall accumulation over the South Pacific across the next 10 days. So Fiji itself expecting 50 to 100 millimeters, nothing to write home about. And again, on Vanuatu, because it's going to be a thunderstormy tropical system, it doesn't look like there's going to be much rainfall either. The wettest places are really these isolated spots up towards the northern parts of Vanuatu, where you could be seeing up to 100 millimeters of rainfall. What I actually reckon is going to happen is, if we jump back to the satellite imagery and you take a look at this really big convective puff here, wind shear is quite high where this convective puff is moving towards, and you can see because of the really wispy and jagged sort of cloud activity, that's an indicator that wind shear, which tears cyclones apart, is quite high for this tropical cyclone. So it's moving out of a favorable environment here and moving into a really harsh one. I reckon in the next couple of hours, all of this convective activity is going to completely die, and it's going to struggle to blow up anything else. Thus, rainfall is going to be a very minimal threat, and also wind speeds are also going to be quite a minimal threat as well. But if you are in Port Vila, make sure you're just hunkering down throughout the rest of today and into tomorrow. This is a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone right now as per the JTWC. I know the Fiji Met Service hasn't updated it yet to a Category 1 tropical cyclone, but it does likely have Category 1 winds. So make sure you're treating this appropriately. It's a strong weather system. It's nothing crazy or world-ending, but it's still something that can cause some tree damage and also make road conditions very hazardous. So make sure you are still staying as safe as possible. I always mess up on that quote. You might also be able to see the ridiculous amount of thunderstorm activity across the South Pacific. We have a tropical cyclone here and a tropical cyclone, I believe, here as well. Somewhere under here. It's really quite a challenge to see what's going on here under all of this thunderstorm activity, but there is a lot going on in the South Pacific right now, a lot of storm activity, and that is typical for this time of the year. The tropical cyclones over here, this little swirl down here, I was never going to be able to see that with my naked eye. But yeah, definitely a lot of storm activity going across the South Pacific, which is normal for an El Nino. But just to say, we are expecting this El Nino to end sometime around autumn or winter time in the southern hemisphere, and we'll likely see La Nina develop next spring, and that's going to be it will just bring back the strong cyclone seasons that we've been seeing in Australia, and also this ridiculous amount of rainfall that we've been seeing. It's been a really weird El Nino. It really hasn't felt like an El Nino at all for Australia, and yeah, it did not stick around for long, which was completely different to what the Bureau of Meteorology forecast. They were expecting this to stick around for a couple of years, but it has not stuck around for long. It stuck around for a couple of months and then just left us. Anyways, starting to waffle here. We're going to take a look at this strong tropical cyclone up in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and then we'll dive down south and take a look at what's going on around Australia. But you can see all forecast models now have something developing come around next week. The Bureau of Meteorology has given this a 30% chance of development. Me personally, I would go about 20, considering the precursor low has not yet developed, but it does look like it's got some pretty decent model support. The Eastern BF calling for a tropical cyclone to make landfall around Mornington Island in a very similar fashion to how the Access G3 called for a landfall yesterday on the Queensland Northern Territory border around Mornington Island. So that's a little bit interesting. I also believe there's going to be quite a lot of rainfall from this system. Yeah, a lot of locations, especially on the Cape York Peninsula and into far north in North Queensland, you're looking at over 200 millimetres of rain falling. So a lot of rainfall expected, and also around Darwin as well. They won't be escaping it either. I think the GFS model doesn't really call for this tropical cyclone yet. They have been calling for a strong tropical low to develop actually over sort of the northern reaches of Northern Territory around Kakadu, but they haven't really called for anything to develop. In fact, they're calling for it to swing out and towards Western Australia, where it could intensify there, but it really doesn't look like it intensifies at all. And we'll get this strong system here moving in from the southwest Indian Ocean. That might actually look like it. Oh, no, it doesn't. I thought that it's swinging around from here. I thought that was going to go for the West Australian coastline initially, but it looks like it's going to really miss Western Australia. But that's a system that we'll also be tracking on this channel as well as it develops. It looks like it's got a very good chance of developing sometime next week as well. But I guess the forecast model that's really talking all the big talk is, of course, the Access G3, the overestimator of all the major forecast models in Australia. This one's calling for a severe tropical cyclone to impact the Gulf of Carpentaria and its surrounds. We will still take a look at the Access G3 model because it's been calling for this system for about 4 days now, calling for something to spin up across Kakadu by around next Wednesday, the 14th, Valentine's Day, and then as we get into Thursday and Friday, it looks like it emerges around the Groot Island sort of area and then really rapidly intensifies and makes landfall as what looks like a severe tropical cyclone with maximum winds probably approaching 110 kilometers an hour, or maybe it's a little bit weaker than what I thought. Still though, quite a nasty system by the looks of things. It's certainly something that's going to pack a punch with wind gusts up to 150 kilometers an hour for what looks like Robinson River and that sort of area. So a strong cyclone can be expected here. It's definitely a very good idea to keep on top of the forecast if you're around Nullumbi or on Groot Island, Robinson River, down towards Mornington Island, and then all throughout the Gulf of Carpentaria coastline, and then up into the Cape York Peninsula, excluding Cairns, Cooktown, that sort of area. You probably can discard this system as a worry, but it's a very good idea to keep on top of the forecast here. Just check back on it every evening or every morning before you do something that's important, because this is something that can change drastically, but it could also be cemented in the sense that we get a scenario that plays out like this, and you don't want to be caught off guard by this. And if we've still got this on the forecast by around Monday and we've got a precursor tropical low, then I would say that this scenario is also quite likely. It will take the forecast models a couple of days to really catch up to this. scenario, so it will actually be until about Monday that we get a very unified picture from all the forecast models on what we're expecting. But for right now, you can probably expect a strong tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Carpentaria, but there's no need to prepare for one at this time. It's not a concern yet, it's just a forecast. A lot of rainfall can also be expected into the Northern Territory too, down towards Alice Springs, and maybe even towards Ayers Rock, but it looks like Ayers Rock might actually miss the worst of the rainfall here. But a lot of rainfall can be expected, up to 200 to 300 millimetres in some locations outside of Tennant Creek, and with the landfall site is maybe 500 to 600 millimetres, so a lot of rainfall. And this will be associated with a bursting monsoon as well, so this rainfall is also very likely to happen. But yeah, very interesting little factor in our forecast right now, that we've got a very strong tropical cyclone across the Northern Territory and into the Gulf of Carpentaria. That is something that we're really going to be watching quite closely on this channel, so make sure that you are subscribed if you want to see more coverage on this system. Now, as promised, we're going to take a look at the weather across Australia, because I've really neglected it for an Australian weather channel. That's a big no-no. So I'm going to be taking a look first at Western Australia, because hometown, I know exactly what's going on over here. We're expecting some pretty hot conditions for Perth, especially Friday and Saturday, so today and tomorrow. I think Saturday's going to be the really hot day, where we could be seeing maximum approaching 43 degrees Celsius. I'm going to go and sit in the aircon all day on Saturday. That is some bloody hot conditions for sure. There might not be an update on Saturday as well. I have a very big thing, put it that way, in my life that's came up, and I really need to deal with it accordingly. So Saturday there might not be an update, but I will try my best. But yeah, come around Sunday, it looks like the heat will ease out of Perth. But still some pretty hot conditions across the remainder of the state. And yeah, Monday it looks like it's fully eased off as well. But also there could be some hot conditions. A very hot night expected Thursday night. It looks like we might get this trough set itself up across the coastline, and that should make for a very, very humid night indeed. And we could be seeing overnight minimum probably around 30 degrees Celsius for the Perth Metro, which is very, very hot indeed. Yeah, but it looks like by around Friday the cooler conditions set in, and hopefully there we get a bit of a breeze to really give us some reprieve to this really hot weather, because it's been going on for a couple of weeks now. And I know it's summer, February, you never get a cold day in Perth, but it is starting to get quite nasty and quite uncomfortable, and I'm watching my lawn die every single day, and it is quite heartbreaking, that's for sure. Apart from that, looks like we might be getting 1 or 2 hot days across New South Wales and Victoria towards next week. Or maybe into the weekend, and then into early next week we might be getting 1 or 2 hot days, especially throughout South Australia as well, maybe up to 40 degrees Celsius. I know that's not hot for most of South Australia, but yeah, come around next Monday and Tuesday we could be seeing daytime maximum approaching 40 degrees for some locations in Victoria, and Melbourne itself might go to 36 on Monday, and maybe 34 or 33 again on Tuesday, an early maximum there before a pretty big cool change comes in Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. And it looks like we might get a very chilly night in some parts of Tasmania, down to 0 degrees Celsius for maybe 1 or 2 locations. I know the forecast models generally really overestimate the temperatures here for the mountains because of their model resolution, but we could be seeing some pretty chilly nights here for parts of Tasmania. Come around next Wednesday, associated with that cool change, which will come in the form of a cold front, which will then blow towards New Zealand. But it looks like we might get a bit of reprieve from that heat by maybe the middle of next week or early next week for parts of southern Australia. I've read recurring comments about how hot and humid it is in Cape York and up towards the Cape York Peninsula. So I would say that this commentary is probably coming from somewhere around Croydon or Georgetown, where there's been some really hot days here, and also the humidity. I mean, the tropical humidity has been brutal so far this year, that's for sure. And it's been going all down the Queensland coastline, where you're seeing daytime maxima about 3 or 4 degrees above average, and then that humidity is just that cutting edge. It is that really hot, sticky heat where you're seeing these feels like temperatures approaching 42 or 43 degrees Celsius, and that's just some horrible stuff. Not even a fan can help you with that. So if you are up in the Cape York Peninsula, please leave me a weather report in the comments section, but also make sure you're staying cool, using that fan, I find cool towels help. If you've got like a damp towel and you can drape that across your body and then sit in front of the fan, that's a great way to keep cool. In fact, you might actually be cold if you were to use that method. But yeah, staying under the air conditioning, don't do anything vigorous outside, and making sure you're keeping your house closed up as well until the evening hours when that breeze gets in. That's a great way to keep cool. And if you want advice on how to keep cool as well, then make sure to check out the Bureau of Meteorology, or just ask your question in the comment section below. I'll either address it in the next video or I'll respond to you personally. I'm trying to respond to all the comments personally, but I do have a full-time job basically at this point. Which is, quite a lot. But anyway, that is probably a good place to end up on for the Australian weather update. We could just briefly take a look at rainfall, actually. These videos are so unscripted, and I think it's really obvious that. But nothing too severe in terms of rainfall. Maybe parts of northern Queensland might get up towards 100 millimetres over the next 10 days. And then, central New South Wales, some thunderstorms might get 25 to 50 millimetres and a little bit more towards the coast. But apart from that, nothing too severe. I'm not seeing any really standout spots where we're seeing ridiculous quantities of rainfall, except for central Northern Territory and also up into towards the Northern Territory, where the monsoon is expected to burst. But apart from that, it looks like it's fairly stock standard across the Australian continent over the next 10 days. Hot in the day, hot overnight, humid up north, rainfall up north, and dry down south. It looks like Perth might finally get a little bit of a reprieve to the drought as well as per this forecast model, but I'm not holding my breath on that either. Anyways, that's a very disorganised look at the Australian weather and a detailed look at the tropical cyclones that we're expecting in our hometown, or not our hometown, in our home basin, I guess, over the next 10 days. If you did enjoy this video, then please do consider leaving a like and also subscribe if you haven't already. We're just a couple away from 11,000. And your support really does mean a lot. Anyways, that is all from me, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.